The clearance badge was supposed to take 20 minutes. That's what the intake clerk had told me when she handed me the chit and pointed toward a bench along the back wall of the fabrication floor. 20 minutes. Maybe 30 if the verification grid was running behind on its roll call sequence. Just sit tight, she'd said. Don't touch anything. The fabrication cadets would be running an assessment that afternoon, and there was nowhere else to put me, while the maintenance office sorted out why my service authorization had routed me to the wrong building entirely. I was supposed to be in the climate control plant on the east side of campus, servicing the air handling units in the lab wing. That's what my work order said. That's what I'd told the clerk at the main gate, the secondary checkpoint, and the woman with the intake wand who had looked at my tool bag like she expected it to bite her. Nobody could explain how I'd ended up logged into the Vethron Academy of Applied Sciences Supplemental Observer Registry. The clearance system had accepted my credentials without complaint and assigned me a seat number. Apparently that was enough. So I sat, bench 4, far back wall, out of the way of the cadets filing in along the center aisle. There were 11 of them, tall, most of them. The Vethron build tends toward height, and a kind of rigid posture that looks formal until you realize it's just how the crystalline bone lattice sits under the skin, load-bearing and slightly forward. They moved in clusters of 2 and 3, collecting workstation kits from a cart near the door, and they settled along the main fabrication tables with the deliberate quiet of people who understood that the next few hours would be graded. I didn't know what the assessment involved. I didn't need to. I set my tool bag between my feet, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. Lead fabricator Osven Drahl came in from the side corridor. He was older than the cadets by a good margin, and the crystalline lattice in his forearms had gone the deep amber gray of long-settled growth. He moved along the tables with the unhurried precision of someone who has run the same assessment for years and expects, from the start, to be disappointed by most of what he sees. His 6 limbs kept a measured cadence. His pressure-sensitive fingers dragged lightly across one cadet's workstation edge as he passed, not touching the kit, just reading the table's density. He noted something in his register without looking up. Then he saw me. He stopped. His fingers went still against the table edge. I gave him a small nod. He looked at the tool bag, back at me. He crossed to where I was sitting in a way that did not suggest he was in any particular hurry, which made it feel more deliberate. "This floor is a closed assessment space," he said. His galactic standard was precise, the consonants dense with the back of palate pressure the Kelvarathi use when they want to be very clear. The bench you are occupying is inside the assessment boundary. "Clearance badge is processing," I told him. "Clerk sent me in here to wait. I'll be out of your way inside the hour." He looked at the tool bag again. "Don't touch the materials kit." There was a cart 3 meters to my left. A single sealed kit sat on its lower shelf, separated from the others, which I hadn't paid any attention to until he said that. I looked at it, looked back at him. "Wasn't planning to," I said. He held my gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable, for someone who probably wanted to get on with his afternoon. Then he turned back to his cadets and began the session brief. I stopped listening after the first 2 minutes. Not out of disrespect. I just had nothing useful to contribute to an explanation of stress load tolerances and bonding agent ratios in a materials system I'd never worked with. I watched his hands instead, the way he picked up a sample composite from the demonstration stand and let his pressure-sensitive fingers move over it, reading it from the inside out. That was the Kelvarathi thing. They feel density the way humans feel temperature, instinctive and immediate. He knew what that piece weighed, and how it would fail before it had been tested. He also knew, from the particular set of his shoulders, that most of his cadets did not. They got to work. The kits went open, the room filled with the careful noise of people trying to be precise. I lasted about 12 minutes. It wasn't intentional. The problem was that the lone kit on the lower shelf was sitting with its clasp partially unlatched. Not my doing. And the materials inside were shifting with the micro-vibration of the cadets' work at the tables, and I could hear it. Dry composite panels against a metal interior. I know that sound the way I know the sound of a duct coupling that's going to shear loose at hour 62 of a service cycle. It's not loud. It's specific. I leaned over, confirmed the clasp was working loose on its own, and secured it. Then I looked at what was inside. The kit held a set of composite panels, 4 of them, standardized dimensions, a bonding agent tube, a small tensioning tool, and a test mandrel that the finished piece would be mounted to for the stress read. Standard materials assessment. I'd never worked with this particular composite, but I knew the panel stock, layered silicate fiber with a resin matrix, 40 years out of date by Earth standards, but the principles were the same as everything I'd built since I was 23 years old, and first got my hands on thermal insulation board in a recirculation shaft with a broken rivet gun and a foreman who'd told me to figure it out or go home. I figured it out then. I had 20 minutes now and nothing else to do. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. There was no one watching me. Osvendral was at the far end of the tables, running his fingers over a cadet's half-formed piece and not bothering to hide his assessment of it. I was just keeping my hands busy. 2 decades of field fabrication work doesn't switch off because you're sitting on a bench waiting for paperwork. The hands know what to do and they do it. I built it the way I'd have built anything in a zero-pressure duct housing with 1 functioning tool and a 2-hour window. Measure once with fingers, score on the first pass, no second-guessing the angles. The bonding agent I applied with the back of the tensioning tool because that's how you get an even bead when you haven't got a proper spreader. The joint sequence went outside in. Same as you'd seal a pressure fitting. You work from your least forgiving tolerance outward, so if anything moves, it moves toward tolerance rather than away. The mandrel seated on the 3rd try. I checked the face alignment against the edge of my thumbnail, which has been calibrated to level by 22 years of necessity. It took me 16 minutes. I set it aside and looked at my hands. The room was quiet in a different way than before. I looked up. Osvendral was standing at the end of the fabrication table nearest me. He had not made a sound crossing the floor. His amber-gray lattice arms were still, and his pressure fingers were not moving, which I had learned in the last hour meant he was processing something without the benefit of tactile data to confirm it. He was looking at the piece on the kit lid. He did not move toward it immediately. He finished making his way through the cadets first, 3 more workstations, the same unhurried pace, though his stops were shorter now. When he reached me, he stopped and stood for a moment, and then he picked up the piece. I watched his fingers move across it. The Kelvarathi pressure read is involuntary at a certain resolution. When something surprises them, the fingers stutter, a brief irregular rhythm before they settle back into the scan pattern. His fingers stuttered at the bonding joint, moved to the face alignment, stuttered again. He set it on the mandrel and crossed to the stress testing rig at the end of the floor. The rig's display column was visible from where I was sitting. I saw the load figure climb. I saw it pass the column's upper threshold mark, which had a small indicator line etched into the casing at what I assumed was the assessment ceiling. The load figure kept climbing. The indicator line was 2/3 of the way up the display. The figure crested past it and held. Osvendral looked at the display for a long moment. He picked up the piece, walked back to the testing bench beside me, and set it on the corner of the surface. Not in the kit, on the bench itself. He didn't say anything. His fingers lay flat and still at his sides. I checked the time on my work order. 43 minutes. The clearance badge would have processed by now. I zipped my tool bag, stood up, and slung it over my shoulder. "Air handlers in the east wing," I told him. "I'll be out of your way." He didn't move the piece from the bench. I didn't look back when I left. The fabrication floor was behind me, and the corridor stretched ahead toward the climate control plant, which had a cracked coupling on Unit 7 and a filter housing that had been running 3 degrees hot for at least a month by the look of the discoloration on its intake sleeve. I had work to do.